afternoon.
Thanks, Meenakshi. I mean, it's really wonderful to have you here, and a warm welcome to all of you. Quick house rules. We will open up the Q&A 15 minutes to, before the session ends, and then, we'll let you know, and you can have your questions coming in. And this is also being telecasted live on our FB channel as well as on YouTube. And keep your comments and shares coming in on our social media channels. So again, a warm welcome to all. First, I want to kickstart the session by asking Meenakshi some, as the title of today is all about trends and opportunities in the Indian wellness industry, and given her career background and credentials, I want to start by asking, from an Indian Forest Services officer, being part of the National Medicinal Plant Board, Ayush Ministry, and now currently her role, how is she seeing this Indian wellness industry changing? How has it changed during her career span? Over to you, Meenakshi.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. People who have taken the trouble to join this, and good afternoon to all Vidya, you and your team.
Thank you.
So, if I understand what you said correctly, was how the entire sector has evolved over, at least Correct. During maybe post-independence.
Yes.
Right. So if you see the whole well-being, now well-being is a big basket of products and services, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's generally, when we talk of well-being, it is immediately in the mind, it gets connected with traditional health systems or traditional medicine.
Yes.
Which is, of course, how it should be, because traditional medicine is all about well-being. As you can see how it has changed now, if you look at what we were at independence.
Yeah.
The Indian systems of medicine and this entire well-being sector was really on the back burner. It was not in the mainstream at all.
Yeah.
But thanks to the visionary leadership of the day, they revived the systems. Not only that, Gandhiji, how he was the first natural scientist, I know, nature-based conservationist and scientist and practitioner of the systems, he himself. So under the guidance of those visionary leaderships, the traditional medicine system, education, practice, even drugs, these all things came onto the, at least into focus, if not the mainstream. And over a period of time, then you had the Indian Medicine Central Council Act in 1970. You had the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, which is, of course, a pre-independent act, but you had a separate chapter dealing with the regulation of drugs introduced into that sometimes in the 70s. And then we had, in the early 90s, actually, we started what is known as the Indian System of Medicine. It used only a wing in the Health Ministry. Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the government of India, there was a wing which was dedicated to Indian systems of medicine. And it was not a separate, did not have a separate identity zone. And it was only in the late 90s, 1996, that separate department of Indian systems of medicine was started. So this had its full-fledged administrative setup, its own building, etc. And then it started regulating the systems in the states. And the states also then started having their own individual wings dedicated to it. It was only in 2005 that it was renamed as the Ministry of Ayush. That stood for the entire Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, Homeopathy, and later on Sowa Rigpa was also added to it. So all these systems put together became the Ministry of Ayush. So that is the institutional framework of how it has spanned over the years in the Indian context. Now, if you would like to ask me something, or you want me to continue as to what happened at the global context.
Please continue with what happened globally. I think that context is so important.
Yeah. So what happened globally was, as you know, WHO, as early as 1948, gave a definition of health, which was basically that health is a complete, it brought well-being, and it said physical, mental, and social well-being. That is the definition of health, which was given by WHO as early as 1948.
Yeah.
But look how long it took for that concept to percolate into our mainstream ideas and the policy framework and everything else.
Yeah.
So how it happened was WHO gave this definition, and then slowly things changed in the world. As you know, the population aged, the disease burden shifted from malnutrition, hunger, communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases. So while all this evolution was happening, there was a thought all over the world, health leadership of the world, that health is much more than just treating the ill. It should not only treat the ill, it should also treat the well. Those who are not ill should also be under the scanner.
Yeah, it's just not about the absence of disease, but it's the presence of wellness.
That's precisely. So it is not only absence of disease, it is well-being in totality.
Yes.
So, at the global level, then you had the Rio Earth Summit in 1990, when Sustainable Development Agenda 21, wherein health was mentioned to some extent.
Yeah.
But it got distilled in the, I would say, in the Millennium Development Goals in 2000. And as many as 3 Millennium Development Goals were dedicated to health. There were only 8 MDGs. 3 of them were dedicated to health.
Yeah.
And out of the 3, I think it was goal 5, 6, or it was 4, 5, and 6, I think. The goals 4, 5, and 6. 4 was about child mortality, reducing child mortality. 5 was, goal 5 was about maternal health. And goal 6 was combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. So this is the whole basket of the health in MDGs. These were what were tackled. Now, if you put it together, out of 8 MDGs, 3 are devoted to health. Put together, all 3 could only touch the tip of the iceberg, really.
Sure.
That was as late as 2000.
Okay.
Right. Then in 2000, from 2000 to 2015, when finally the MDGs were replaced by the SDGs, and out of the 17 SDGs, there is only 1 SDG devoted to health. And what does it say? It says health for all, well-being for all ages, health and well-being for all ages. That's all. So that covers the entire gamut of whether it is malaria, HIV, kidney disease, cardiovascular, everything. So, so it was as late as 2015, right?
Yes.
Globally, at the global level, there was some kind of a structure, there was some thought, it yet got concretized, but WHO had proposed in 1948.
Sure.
So
how did they, now once they got this SDG in place, how did the focus or the refocus on Indian traditional, medicines and systems, how did sort of suddenly come into fore? And I also want to see, how did yoga, International Yoga Day, play a role in all of this?
Right. So if you look at the Indian context, now it's not as, it became sudden. All right, it might be sudden for some people who, or for the larger population actually, because it was not, that advocacy was not there for the systems. And people didn't know where to, even today, I think there are problems in people finding the right treatment. But to get back to what I was saying, what happened at the global level, and all these definitions came around of treating, of well-being and well-being, health for all ages. What Ayurveda say? Nearly 2,500 years ago, at least, if not more. There are different dates. Different people have pegged it at different times. But the most conservative estimates also put it at least 500 years before Christ. So what did Ayurveda say at that time? Swasthya Rakshanam. So what was health for Ayurveda? Swasthasya means those who are healthy. Swasthya Rakshanam, to protect. So Ayurveda has said all those millennia ago, health is protecting the health of the healthy. Swasthasya Swasthya Rakshanam. So that was already stated so many years ago, but it took the world such a long time to understand what was said there. So today we have to target both the well and the ill, right? So it is basically promotive aspects, preventive aspects, promotion of good health, prevention of disease, and a holistic lifestyle through various methods. Well-being is one of those. So, so that's how what I said and how it has happened over the years. And as far as your question, how SDGs have got, now the thing is that the government is driving the SDGs. Every department has some or the other role in the SDGs, because of the 17 SDGs, everybody gets covered somewhere or the other.
Right.
Health department also has its own, there is a whole set of indicators, sub-indicators, what are the parameters, what are the things that need to be done over the next 5-10 years in order to achieve the SDG goals. So that's how things at the international level drive things at the national level. And when they are driven, then outcomes are definitely going to, hopefully they will be there down the line.
Understood. No, thanks so much for sharing that. So coming back, so in the domestic context, this whole idea of creating this Ayush ministry, right? Because it was all earlier very different departments that have been now integrated, and given the context of SDGs, how would you sort of see the changes, in terms of delivering healthcare itself, or adoption of the Indian traditional systems? What does it mean for the ill and the well, and then what does it mean for people who are on the supply side of things? The herbal farmers, is India closer to being a wellness destination in some ways? How do you see things that have changed? What do you think are the opportunities or the challenges in this space right now?
Yeah. So, right, that's a good question. Actually, it's many questions rolled into one.
Yes.
So, the thing is, if you conduct a SWOT analysis of the sector, if you look at the strengths, now, because we have to break it up into pieces to understand the whole. So,
yes,
Ayurveda is a holistic system, that apart. So, if you break it up into parts, you have the strengths. What are our strengths? Our strengths is that we have the knowledge, right? And as you said, I'll come back to the question of what the ministry is doing and all that after why the ministry came into being. Yes. So you have, what is the strength? We have the knowledge. Right? That is our biggest asset. We have the knowledge, time tested, validated by centuries of practice. We have that knowledge, body of knowledge. And one point I would like to make here for everyone is that it is not something written in the text and forgotten about. It is not a static. It has evolved. It has developed down the ages, right up to the current modern day. Modern day Ayurveda doctors are using modern diagnostics to diagnose illnesses, right? So it is it has adapted to change. It has evolved over change. So whatever was written by Charak is not, it's not scripture. It's not dogma. It's not what people tend to think. It's some mumbo jumbo. I was surprised when I saw Wikipedia. I just opened Wikipedia and I saw that they had written something very demeaning about these systems, which is not at all how it should be. Because that point I wanted to make here, because there are many Ayurveda doctors on the show, and I hope they rebut that because Wikipedia is open to all. Everybody can put in their views. So right in the beginning, if you say it's a pseudoscience, something is wrong somewhere. So that needs to be corrected. But anyhow, that part, so that knowledge is there, evolving, adapting over the years. And that is the biggest strength we have. The second strength is that we have the resource base, which is where the forestry angle comes in actually. See, there are more than 700 to 800 medicinal plants which are used on a large scale in Ayurveda and the other systems, Unani, homeopathy. And there are more than 2,500 which have been described, which are used by folk healers and modern Ayurveda doctors, everybody put together. So, and India, fortunately, is a land where all these can grow. It's home to all these people, all these herbs, from the Himalayas to the oceans, from the deserts to the tropical climate, temperate, middle plains of the Indo-Gangetic plain. I mean, we have everything here, which will enable us to grow those resources. The third strength we have is in the modern scientific capability. We have modern, state-of-the-art modern scientific institutes, whether it is ICMR, whether it is CSIR, whether they are Ayush-driven research laboratories, CISR laboratories spread over the country. So we have that modern scientific capability to validate the knowledge, which is validated by centuries of practice. But for today's discerning consumer and policymakers, they need validation along certain other lines, and we have the strength to validate. We only need to put our minds to it. So and the other strength we have, which is a very big strength, is that we have modern day institutions churning out graduates in Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy by the hundreds. So we have the trained manpower. So we have the knowledge, we have the resource base, we have the science, we have trained manpower being developed and being built up every day.
Yeah.
These are the strengths. But if you look at the strengths, there is a flip side to every strength, which is actually the weakness. And if you look at the weaknesses, then you look for the opportunities. Because wherever there are weaknesses, there lies an opportunity. What are the weaknesses? If you talk of the knowledge, of course, knowledge, there is no weakness as far as I know. And I would like emphatically say here that knowledge is there for everybody to use. It's mankind's heritage. It's not for anybody. It's not for a closed group or anything. But as far as the resource is concerned, certainly there are many constraints, many constraints. I don't think I've mentioned that, but 75 to 80% of the resource still continues to be harvested from the wild. We're still dependent on wild sources for those resources. And they are so what is happening? If it's like, the tragedy of the commons, that's very oft-repeated.
Meenakshi, just a quick question that I would ask you. One is, you mentioned about all these modern scientific institutions. Of course, there's knowledge, resource, and trained manpower, all of that. But, whether it's ICMR or IMA, for a long time, there was this bit of a conflict, right? This traditional sciences was not considered mainstream, whereas the allopathic was considered mainstream, right? And then backed by insurance, health insurance, all of that stuff, right? So, of course, there's this communicable diseases and NCD and all of that exists as well. But how did these sort of modern scientific institutions that we have, the apex bodies, was it always a stepmotherly treatment, dare I say, to the Indian traditional knowledge systems, and have things changed because of our Ayush becoming a ministry at all?
Yes,
right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. After the government shifted its focus from Indian system of medicine being one small wing in the health department to a full-fledged ministry. The ministry came about later in 2012 or 13. Ministry was, it was in 2015 that the ministry came up. Prior to that, it was always a department. It was Department of Ayush. Ministry came about later. So once that happened, once the ISM moved out of the health and became an independent entity in its own right, you find that the focus changes. When we have the Indian pharmacopoeia, it's known as the Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia of India, Unani pharmacopoeia, homeopathy. So they have pharmacopoeias. And this is not known to many people that we have pharmacopoeias along modern lines, which have been developed along with ICMR, the best labs of CISR have worked with the Department of Ministry of Ayush. The best in the ICMR have worked with Ministry of Ayush to have these pharmacopoeias. And now we have, latest would be, I think there are more than 12, 13 volumes of Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia of India. And these are well documented, put into perspective what is Ayurveda, how it is validated. And so that is the kind of focus which changed, as you said, once it became a ministry, not only at the domestic level, at the global level. I mean, it was because of constant negotiations at various levels, whether it was the EU, whether it was the Canadian health authorities, Australian regulatory agencies. Now in Canada, the Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia of India is a recognized document. So if you want to sell a product in Ayurveda, you have to produce the citation from, you have to still establish safety and quality, but you need not start from scratch. You don't have to enter into clinical trials and establish the drug route, how it acts, not at all. The Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia of India is recognized. If it's cited there, then it is good enough for Canada. Of course, Canada is one of the best.
It brings one very interesting question, Meenakshi, now that you mentioned about it. Because we're predominantly talking to cultural entrepreneurs, that's our community, and we're focused on health and wellness. What sort of country regulations or challenges do Indian entrepreneurs face if they have to export Ayurvedic products from here? Right. Or challenges they face in India as well, right? Both in export as well as domestic market.
As well as, that's right. Actually, there is, see, every country has its own regulations. As far as that for that country, it's an import, right? So if supposing you want to go to Canada, as I said, but every country has started realizing and has been realizing for the past at least 20 years, if not more, that there is a need for them to regulate herbal drugs. Regulation of herbal drugs means that they recognize that it is required. The moment a country said it wants to regulate it, means that they know that there is a requirement, people are demanding it, there is a awareness about it, there is a demand for it. The consumer wants it. They want to regulate it. So that is the very first indication that yes, they want our products. So every country has different regulations, as I said. Canada, for example, has health. They have their Health Canada, where now that I can see something on the chat and it's distracting me. They said that all natural extracts and oils should be recognized. Yes, that's right. That's where the government is going. I saw that question right just now on the chat.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's not get distracted by it. There's a Q&A session, Meenakshi Ji.
Okay.
We'll have all the questions in the Q&A.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So in Canada, for example, they recognize the API. Ayurvedic API is the Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia of India.
Yeah.
Ultimately, our goal should be that every country should recognize the API because it has monographs, it has extensive science behind it. Every individual plant, every formulation in Ayurveda is documented, and mode of action and parts which are treated, just like a monograph. You know what is a monograph? Everything is there about that plant. And then all these naysayers who will say, where is the evidence? See, it's very easy to beat on somebody by saying, where is the evidence? I mean, the evidence is not going to walk to you. You have to open books. You have to read the journals. You have to see where the evidence is. How can the evidence say that, look, here I am? Yeah. Of course, some kind of advertising can happen. So Canada is one example, for example. Then you have EU. EU is a different cup of tea altogether. So if there is if somebody wants to export their products, the point I'm making, there are different regulations in different countries. EU has made it a little more difficult in the sense we have what is known as the Traditional Herbal Medicinal Product Directive, THMPD. Now, that under THMPD, they have certain guidelines and rules as to how to register a product. You need a market authorization for marketing a product in the EU. But for that marketing authorization, the quality parameters are, I don't know, I can say it here, I think they are excessive. Definitely they are required, but do you need to make them so excessive and so inaccessible that no product is actually registered? It's very difficult to register.
Question, Meenakshi Ji. So is it because it's just pharmaceutical and healthcare and medicine industry in EU, and that's where the sort of very fine grain, requirements and criteria come into place, or we've not done a good job of selling the kind of regulation that's required? Have you not taken the lead as a country from where a lot of the traditional knowledge systems have come in? Have you not taken the lead?
India I'm sorry, did you
I'm saying you mentioned about the EU regulations being extensive, right?
Excessive.
Excessive. I'm saying, is it the same situation in India, or have you not done a good job of educating in terms of what's the kind of regulation they need to have?
Yes. Look, in India, we are more or less comfortable with the regulations. There are, but in India, just to give maybe one or two examples. Now, cannabis, as you know, cannabis is a plant which is found all over the country.
Yes.
From the Himalayas to everywhere possible.
Yes.
And it grows like a weed everywhere.
Yes.
So how do we regulate cannabis in the country? Almost everybody is regulating it. From the police to the Ayush department, to the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, to the Enforcement Directorate, to the Forest Department. Everybody is into regulation of cannabis. Why? It's deregulated everywhere. Right? So that is one example I'm giving. And look at the trade potential of cannabis. Last year, I think it was somewhere close to $31 billion US.
Yeah.
And by 2026, it's going to be $60 billion.
Yeah.
So that's a CAGR of plus 15.
Yes.
Which industry will give you a CAGR like that?
Yes,
but we have to be open to the opportunity. We have to start regulations ourselves. So that is an area where we are excessively regulating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a THC component and there's a CBD component, right? The
Correct.
CBD part, I think, should take the lead in lots of ways, right? The regulation that has happened is primarily because of the THC component, which happened
That
in the
may be. Look,
Yes.
we can regulate things in a different way also,
Yes.
whichever component it is. That's not the
Yeah.
point. But for Ayurveda medicine, you need the THC component.
Right.
And if you want to make medicine, you have to do that. But this is not about medicine. This is about wellness products, oils and cream, lotions and stuff. And
Yes.
fiber is used. Everything is used. What a livelihood opportunity there it is.
Yeah.
And we can easily regulate the THC content. It's not that we cannot. We
Yeah.
should and we must. But
Yes.
we cannot ban things. We cannot just be so ham-handed, you know, at
Yeah.
stuff that you
Yeah.
lose the opportunity for your people, farmers,
Yes. Yes.
entrepreneurs. But I'm very happy to know that there are many youngsters who are very interested in this. In fact, I received, as Ayush Commissioner, I received several applications for cultivation, etc., etc. And I don't know if I have to say it here, but I managed to find ways and means of allowing it to happen, allowing it to grow, because
Yeah.
that's how we have to do. And at the same time, we have to work at the regulations and the regulatory authorities. So this is how it has to be done.
Yeah.
So, but this is excessive regulation I'm talking about. Otherwise, herbal medicines in the country are very well recognized under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. There is a separate chapter. There is a schedule for GMP. What are the general, what should be the good manufacturing practices for Ayurvedic medicines?
Yes.
There is a pharmacopoeia. The rub, as I told you earlier, lies in the medicinal plant base. Where is the raw material? Where is the raw material? That is the biggest crux, and I'm sure many of my industry friends who are here on this chat will also say that. Medicinal availability of the resource is the biggest constraint today. And for that, the National Medicine Plant Board, Ministry of Ayush, they are putting things together. It's taking time. That's where they come in.
Yeah, could you give a glimpse of the kind of work that National Medicine Plant Board, PP, does? You talked about the resource on the base. Is it about cultivation? Have they identified a list of such plants that's required, varieties? Have they looked at which region grows best, what kinds?
Yes.
Could you give a sense of what they do and how that's changed or helping the wellness industry?
Correct. See, now, the National Medicine Plant Board definitely has brought out a list of plants which can be cultivated. They are even giving subsidy for that cultivation of those particular plants.
Yeah.
And the subsidy also is graded 30%, 50%, 75%, depending upon the difficulty of growing or the how the species, whether it's threatened or common species. So there are different grades of subsidies that they are giving. That is one way. That is one. But whatever may happen, and there is a shift towards cultivation. It is globally recognized that medicine plant cultivation is picking up, and there is a gradual shift. There are so many papers written on the subject. There is a gradual shift from wild collection to cultivation. But the fact remains that out of the 2,500 plants which are documented here for treatment for various illnesses, we cannot grow them outside the forest. There are plants which grow only in certain regions. After the biogeography, after everything, we can cultivate some plants in different parts of the country.
If I don't mind me asking you, Meenakshi ji, can you quote a couple of plants, what these are?
Certainly. For example, you have Ashoka.
Okay.
Ashoka is Saraka Ashoka. Okay. Yeah. Now, Saraka Ashoka is an endangered species. It's highly threatened. And there was a time, I don't know if I like to believe that Ravana, when he kept Sita in Ashoka Vatika, that was because Ashoka Vatika was the most beautiful place in Lanka, of course, that we know. And Ashoka Vatika was so called, I like to believe, and I think it might be true also, is because it had a lot of Ashoka trees, which is not far from the truth. Ashoka is a beautiful tree, and the flower of Ashoka, you cannot behold a more beautiful sight than seeing the flower of Ashoka in full bloom. It's so beautiful. Wow. And the natural occurrence of Ashoka is also that side. Sri Lanka, the Western Ghats, into the Eastern Ghats, and then into Orissa and West Bengal. So this entire belt at one point was covered with Ashoka forest. Now, what is used? The bark of the Ashoka tree is used for making what is known as Ashoka Rishta, which is used for various ailments in Ayurveda. Yeah. Now, it has dwindled because it is not cultivated. It is exclusively found in the wild. And from the wild areas, how much can you harvest? There are issues of sustainability, especially the bark. When the bark and roots are used, then naturally the trees are endangered. If it's only the leaves and the fruits, then the tree will survive. But if you remove bark in an unsustainable manner, the tree dies. Right. So that's what has happened. And now it is an RET, rare, endangered, and threatened species. But Ashoka Rishta you will find in the market by the gallons. It's available.
I see. Okay. No, interesting point. So, it brings me, very interesting point to consider. One is the resources and the trees. The other is, how do you make them available to people? And then this whole building a brand and the consumer uptake, all of that. Yes. So there is this medicinal treatment angle, be it Ayurveda or Unani or Siddha that they practice, where you have a specific illness and then there is a treatment. And then there are these, OTC kind of products, which, Daburs and Baidyanath and Himalayas, all of them have been doing it for a very, very long time, right?
Correct.
So one is the efficacy of all of these products. But what we're seeing at NICE, the whole idea we've come about is because we want to ensure entrepreneurs who are building brands using Indic knowledge systems in the health, wellness, and beauty space, leverage and find the necessary support to grow their brand, both in India and outside India. From that perspective, I want to understand, what have you seen from an entrepreneur's perspective? Do we have all these sort of wherewithal for somebody to build a brand or produce a product that can be consumed by people across the world or in India for that matter, right? Correct. Because today, earlier the Datun used to be, associated with somebody who was from the country. Today, the Datun is back in Amazon, right? It's kind of exotic.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere. Yeah. Somebody sent me a WhatsApp of that. Yes.
Yes, right. And turmeric latte, which is known in our grandmom's recipe, but nobody uses turmeric because curcumin doesn't, bind within the body if you don't add it with, with pepper, black pepper. But however, Starbucks sells it. So I just want to understand the context of all of this. What does it mean for a cultural entrepreneur? Do we have the wherewithal? Do we have the right policies?
Yeah. So I'll bring you back to what I said about strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats.
Sure.
If you look at the weaknesses, there is an opportunity in every weakness for the entrepreneur.
Right.
If we are weak on the resource, where to get the resource from, there is an opportunity for the entrepreneur to have clusters of cultivation. Government is very much interested in promoting such clusters. So the entrepreneur has to devote time and get expertise, collect these farmers, and make clusters of cultivation in different biogeographic regions for different plants. That is one opportunity. So on the one hand, resource base is dwindling, but there is an opportunity in the dwindling resource base for the entrepreneur to get it cultivated, or even for sustainable collection. That is one kind of thing. Then there is a weakness in communication, or advocacy for the systems. This is a big weakness. As you know, IDY, which you touched upon earlier, IDY has really propelled us into the global consciousness. I don't know how to put it, but yoga was always doing well, right? Even before IDY, yoga was a global brand.
Yeah.
Now, what is the opportunity for an entrepreneur there? Yoga is already a global brand. What can you do about it? There are several things. Yoga is not only asanas. So the cultural entrepreneur, now everybody is ready to go on to the next. Actually, yoga is, it's like a staircase. It's about yama, niyama, pratyahara, and asana, pratyahara, and etc. Pranayama, pratyahara, sadhana, dharana, sadhana. So those are the different steps of the staircase.
Yeah.
So you have to start with yama, niyama. So the right advocacy, the right education itself is an opportunity for the entrepreneur.
But unfortunately, we live in this sort of fast food era, right?
Correct. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to the products also. So I'm just talking about each weakness and where we can leverage that. That weakness is actually an opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
So advocacy is one area where entrepreneurs can do exceedingly well.
Yeah.
Then products.
Yeah.
Now, why are we not able to some simple things. Why are we not able to register our products in, let us say, EU? Of course, the domestic market is so big that the entrepreneurs can easily just handle the domestic market. That would be good enough for any entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But if the country has to grow, we need people from outside to come here. We need their money, right? If we need to grow.
Capital is required, yes.
Yes. So if we need their money, then we need to either export our goods or we import those people here to use ourselves.
Yeah.
So there is the whole lot of the entire well-being basket is open. You need that last mile connectivity.
Yeah.
You need regulations, so entrepreneurs can as well become pressure groups on the government to make this entire system of, if I want to come to India, I have to first apply for a visa. Even after having made up my mind, I have to apply for it. That process should be streamlined. That process should be made much simpler than what it is today. Because I have friends overseas who say that getting an Indian visa is like a Himalayan task, right? So right from step one to reaching the wellness center somewhere in the Himalayas or the Western Ghats, Kerala, wherever. So that last mile connectivity, that entire chain, there are several areas where the entrepreneurs can come in. Then products. I would come to products the last, because actually it's a whole basket of goods and services. And products, as far as products is concerned, I gave you the example of cannabis. I can give you so many. One of the opportunities that there is for entrepreneurs is that these systems have always been and are still very easy drug discovery channels, very easy, well-established channels for modern drug discovery. After all, what is penicillin? What is quinine? What is reserpine? All these are plant-based. They have been derived from some plant or the other. And which plants to tackle has always been indicated by somebody or the other. There are trillions and trillions and trillions of molecules in the world. Why do we focus on reserpine? Why did we go to quinine? Because somebody was using quinine. Somebody saw that this particular people use cinchona bark. They don't get malaria. So traditional knowledge is very important. Gives the leads, and Ayurveda has these leads by the dozen. And it is a well-recognized fact that it is the modern drug discovery route, right? And for an entrepreneur, that is very important. Now we have, for example, Taxol. Taxol, which is derived from the yew tree and basically Taxus genus. And we have Taxus wallichiana growing in the hills in India. But that, of course, is a different Taxus species. This is Taxus wallichiana, which has also been worked on by many CSIR labs, etc. There's ashwagandha, there is tulsi, there is haldi, so many species. Taxol, I think it is the largest ever grosser of any medicine. It's an anti-cancer drug, and it is the largest grosser even today out of any drug, not only plant-based, but any other drug. So it is the largest grosser, and it is derived from plants.
So is India the largest supplier?
No, we are not. Unfortunately, that's where lies the opportunity for the entrepreneur. Right. That's what I was saying. So there are these great many strengths we have, but the flip side of each strength is a weakness, and every weakness is an opportunity, right? Whether it is in the easing of the regulations, whether it is on ease of reaching that resort, wherever it is, that well-being center of well-being, whether it is providing opportunities to these this manpower that is coming out every year from various educational institutions. There is a whole pool of trained manpower, ocean of trained manpower, which have to be used. So these are the opportunities which entrepreneurs have. Cannabis, I gave you that example.
Yes. No, Meenakshi, no, thanks so much. So before we open up the Q&A session, I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you. One is a broad question in terms of if India, given the wealth of knowledge that we have, right? And then we have this concerted effort to Ayush. I'm not so familiar with the different policies that have been in place with Ayush, but I'm thinking to myself that India could be the wellness destination of the world, the wellness capital of the world. But what does it take to get there? There are different moving parts, like you mentioned. It could be the resources piece, the products piece, right? There is this preventive treatment piece, and then this, and then this quality and, manufacturing, quality, skill, all of that have to come together as well, right? So in your view, what does it take to get there?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. Actually, see, if India has to be the wellness destination of the world. Now, wellness in India, as what I was looking at some reports, FICCI has placed it at something like $6.5 billion, 6.5 USD as on today. And of a global market which runs into, you have mentioned it in your flyer, that's about,
yes.
And by 2050, it'll be, by 2030, it's going to be $60
billion, yes.
$60 billion, and by 2050, it'll be $1.5 trillion.
Yes.
That is the kind of projection there is. So, and why India should not have a major pie of that?
Exactly.
Major piece of that pie. We should, ideally we should. We are, as I said, if you look at our strengths, the knowledge, the resource base, the trained manpower, the scientific institutions, we have it all. So where is the problem? The problem is in this entire, as I said, starting with getting a visa to that last mile connectivity, that and advocacy. So there are two things. Basically, I think if we just try to tackle two things, one is the institutions, the institutional framework, which is basically governing the entire system, and the second is advocacy. If we can create advocacy through our ambassadors, through our counselors abroad, through our embassies, and through universities. And Ayush department is doing a lot of, Ayush ministry is doing a lot of this work, but that cannot, one ministry alone cannot do it. We need to set up chairs. And
absolutely right. Because in all of this Ayush thing, the Ayurveda and yoga part, and to some extent the homeopathy is in the limelight.
Yes.
Right? I mean, the large section of people don't know about Unani or Siddha at all, right? Because they all have a unique place in the field of medicinal treatment. And I know it's a very, very vast subject, and we need a lot more time to talk about. In the interest of time, I want to open up the Q&A section and ask the attendees to start posting their questions. Can you open up the Q&A section, please? And request all of you to post your questions that you have for Meenakshi ji. Okay, so we have a question from Naveen. Okay, if the conservation of medicinal plant through cultivation, is it an effective mechanism in protecting genetic resource? So, which means, is cultivation, going back to encouraging cultivation of these plants, is that the best way to protect them? Or because some plants are extinct, right?
Yes.
How do you prevent extinction of some of these medicinal plants? I think that's the question.
Correct. So as I stated earlier also, there are some niche plants which have to grow in the niche. It cannot be cultivated. They cannot be cultivated. We don't have the cultivation practices for many of them. But for more than 200 species now, the National Medicinal Plant Board has brought out cultivation practices. They are well established. So if we can take up cultivation of at least that many plants and bring them out of wild harvest, then definitely this is what is known as an ex situ conservation measure. Because you're not, and there is an in situ conservation measure, which means you protect the plant inside the habitat, which is by sustainable harvest, augmenting it in the wild. But cultivation definitely is a very important measure of conserving the resource, ex situ conservation of the resources. So that is a very important thing. And we have cultivation practices for many of them. And that there is another area for your entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They can actually, and there are several institutions which would like to fund studies on cultivation, how to develop cultivation techniques, on cultivation techniques.
I see.
That itself
if I were to request you to give me a couple of examples in terms of what categories or what plants people should focus. I know cannabis you mentioned, hemp is another.
Cannabis has its own problems of regulation.
Yes.
There is ashwagandha, there is tulasi, there is curcumin, There is what is known as Andrographis paniculator, which is used in larger quantities. Then there is a whole list of 200 plants actually, which includes sandal, red sandals, Ashoka, Embellia, and I mean, there are a whole range of species known as Dashamula Rishta. Dashamula Rishta means the roots of 10 plants are used, 5 of which are herbs and 5 of which are trees. So these Dashamula plants, then creepers, and 200, there is a list of 200 plants which can be cultivated outside.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Now, the other question that's come from Nitin is this whole issue of adulteration, particularly in the context of, see, you mentioned Chyawanprash been around for a very long time, right? So there is Dabur's Chyawanprash and there's somebody else's Chyawanprash and all of that, right? And then same with Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is a generic name. Anybody can make an Ashwagandha, right? So, I mean, these are all OTC products, like we call it, right? But when it comes to serious medicinal treatment, particularly in the context of overseas regulations, how do we ensure there is a quality standards that are adhered to?
Correct.
And then there are manufacturing practices. What is Ayush does, or what is happening currently in India? Give us a sense of that.
Yeah. So, see, standards are available. In the pharmacopoeia, the standards are there. How to grow the plant, how to manufacture the plant, which are the species, which are the parts of the plant to be used, and should be harvested. All those standards have been laid down. Now the question is how to adhere to those standards. Right? And for manufacturing, there is a GMP, good manufacturing practices, which is there in the drug, which is basic, which is in the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. But there are advanced GMPs which are required by importing countries. Other countries will not agree to the GMP that we follow domestically. We have to raise our GMP standards. The EU GMP, for instance, they want their products to be manufactured in a particular kind of facility. And most of these big companies are now getting up to those standards. But this applies to the small entrepreneur also. As if at all you decide to make a product, please see to it that your unit is compliant to the most stringent GMP requirements of other countries. Because it's about quality, right, at the end of it. And quality is not only for India. I mean, it's not only for the rest of the world, it's also for the country.
Correct.
Our people also should have access to quality medicines, right? So GMP laid down in the Act and rules. The Act, as you know, is 1948. So, and our GMP, which was added for Ayurvedic products, is also not that recent. So of late, there are WHO GMP standards are there, EU GMP, you have Canada, US FDA has an office in Delhi. They want even the modern medicines to be manufactured in US FDA level of GMP standards. So those standards are there and we have to adhere to them. So when you set up a plant, when you start a plant, you please start a plant which is GMP compliant. Not only our GMP, but international standards. And standards are there, guidances are there.
Right.
I think Nitin's question was a little different. I don't know. I can't see it here.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the laboratories, the access, evidence of purity, and all of that, which the Western geographies.
Yes. And
do we have the wherewithal and the infrastructure to do that? Is the question.
Of course, it's not rocket science. The quality of a herb is not rocket science. There are given markers which you have to prove through well laid out protocols as to whether it exists and what quantities it exists. It should be free of contaminants. It should be free of heavy metals. Obviously, the usual. It's not great science. But the thing is that the problem is that the traceability to the raw material is not available. You cannot trace the raw material back to from where it came. Because it's all collected from the wild, it's aggregated by somebody, it is retailed by somebody, and then the manufacturer buys it.
Understood.
So if you want to sell something in the EU, they are not going to say, okay, you bought it from Kadi Bauli and therefore you're making a medicine. That is a no-no, straight. You have to be able to say that where you got this herb from.
Okay. So there's another question from Preetham. Medicinal plant resources are conserved when the practice of indigenous traditional knowledge holders are apprised, educated. The practice needs to be kept going at grassroots level. In this sense, does Ayush department have any guidelines to recognize the TK, the knowledge holders, and reward them and encourage them to continue the practice.
Correct. Yes. Okay, now if I got it correct, the question what is being asked is whether outside the formalized Ayush systems, when there are practitioners, the folk healers, if I'm not, I don't know if that
the
is
knowledge
important.
holders, yeah. Folk
Yeah,
healers.
so the knowledge holders. So there is a whole, India started what is known as the traditional knowledge digital library, TKDL. Of course, that also leaves the folk medicines out of its ambit as of now. But eventually they are going to cover it, they say. But as far as the folk healers are concerned, even the CBD recognized, right?
Yeah.
Our own Biodiversity Act and rules, they recognize the need for easy access for these people, for folk healers or traditional Vaidyas in accessing these plants. And traditional knowledge definitely needs protection, and there are various ministries which are working on this. There is a whole lot of IPR, the Indian patent law does not allow any patenting. That is, of course, another, I think, longer discussion. So as far as folk healers are concerned, they need to definitely be recognized. And perhaps what is being stated in this question is that it is not adequate as of now. And I agree completely that it is not adequate as of now, because documenting those practices alone, we have not been able to do.
Yeah. So we have another question, Meenakshi, from Nandini Murthy. Pure castor oil, which is natural elixir for flawless skin and bouncy hair, has been cultivated. How to take it forward? How does Ayush Ministry can help? In some ways, if you are an entrepreneur in the wellness space, when should I and what should I reach out to the Ayush Ministry for?
Yeah.
What kind of help can I expect?
Okay. So one is you can get help for subsidizing the growing of these plants through you or through your friends or through your farmers cluster. That is the first help. The second help is that now the ministry cannot help you in registering the product. That is completely within the ambit of the state government, right? So regulation of drugs, the act is central, but the regulatory authorities are in the state government. So if I want to register, if I want to manufacture a product, I need a manufacturing license from the state regulatory authority in whichever state I want to put up my plant. If it is in Karnataka, I need a license from the drug controller of Ayush, ASU medicines, which is part of the Department of Ayush in Karnataka. And in different states, they are different. Somewhere they are part of the modern medicine establishment. Somewhere they are part of the Ayurvedic establishment. Here also, in Karnataka also, they are part of the Ayurvedic establishment. So the drug controller of ASU drugs is an entity where you have to apply for the license. They will come and inspect your premises. If it is GMP compliant, you'll get the license. Then you start manufacturing. For GMP compliance and for setting up the manufacturing unit, I'm not sure if there is any subsidy or anything like that, but I'm sure banks would step in there. Banks could easily step in for.
Sure. No. So we have one more question. Why is eucalyptus citradora banned by Forest Department? This is apparently huge export potential.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's Karnataka specific. I think it's Karnataka specific question, because in Karnataka, that decision was taken that eucalyptus will not be grown by at least the government. Initially, the ban was throughout the state on everybody. Nobody could grow eucalyptus anymore. But now the ban has been lifted from the private sector at least. But the government still cannot raise plantations of eucalyptus, and therefore everything goes for the six, obviously. But I think there is that's where advocacy should come in actually. After all, it is advocacy which fashions policy. Policymakers don't live in a vacuum, right? So if you have these papers after papers and journals after journals printing that eucalyptus is responsible for fall in the water table, it's an absurd statement. It's an absurd claim. But somehow it's got the fancy of mainstream media and people.
Media.
The eucalyptus tree is a shallow root. It has shallow roots. It can't possibly go down 400 feet and draw water.
Yeah.
And if you look at the other socioeconomic development in the area, you'll realize the increase in the number of bore wells, the decrease in the rainfall, the decrease in water harvesting structures, the change in land holdings, land patterns of land usage, land use patterns, everything has changed, which has resulted in that groundwater falling.
Right.
But eucalyptus is a very easy target of,
target. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the worst kind of propaganda which was unleashed, finally, sadly, leading to this development, which hopefully now, if people are thinking about talking about it, let more people talk about it, I think.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for clarifying on that. I have two questions before we wind up the session, Meenakshi ji. Okay. One is on a serious note. You mentioned about cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, right? How the medicinal effects, we've been really lagging, despite knowing everything, we've just not taken the initiative to do it. The other is like products like psilocybin from mushrooms, magic mushrooms, which have been growing. Because, world over right now, from an emotional wellness and treating depression, a lot of these traditional medicinal plants are being used, right? Unfortunately, we've not taken the lead. What should change? Is it the role of an entrepreneur to make this happen, or is the role of the society, or is the role of the government to take the lead in making some of these changes manifest?
Yes. So I had actually, this question was asked of me when I was in the National Medicine Plant Board by none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of the country. There was a question from his office saying, why is China where it is as far as TCM is concerned? And why are we where we are as far as our traditional knowledge is concerned? We are no less as far as knowledge goes, but we are lagging behind. So what are the reasons? And I reasoned, I think it covered 3 pages of reasoning as to what we should do. So we should just look at what China has done. What have they done? One, in the domestic sector, the first line of treatment is traditional Chinese medicine. Okay, so if I have a cold, the first line of treatment is traditional Chinese medicine. If it doesn't become okay, then I go on. So the kind of importance that is given to it domestically translates into global importance. Because if it is so important globally, we'll also see to it that our standards are global standards. Because if the population is relying on this treatment for large swathes of population, then definitely the regulatory mechanisms will also be much more robust. And we'll have systems which are better. We'll have manufacturing facilities which are better. We'll have herbs which are more quality, with quality herbs. This entire supply chain will be taken care of. So first is domestic importance. You give it importance domestically and you will find the results. Things will fall in place. And the second thing is that tackling the people outside. Now, China, based on one ginseng, which is, if you compare ginseng and ashwagandha, I'm sure ashwagandha is, I know, let's not compare. Comparisons are always not good, but ashwagandha is such a good, what can I say, answer to ginseng. Indian ginseng.
Yes.
But we are not able to corner the market because first, we don't respect our own systems domestically. With that respect and that usage, our standards will go up. If the US FDA happens to visit some facility in India, they'll realize that, oh, this is very good, right? Just like they visit Ranbaxy, just like they visit any other facility and find that it is good enough for US FDA standards. Similarly, our own domestic production units and production processes will be global standards. That is one. Second, the Chinese diaspora outside, because they are used to traditional Chinese medicine in the country, they also use it outside. And there is a big diaspora. And they prefer to use TCM. So TCM finds an automatic, a ready export market, which is not true for Ayurveda. Hardly any Indians living outside would like to use Ayurveda. Maybe because they are not sure of the quality. Yeah. So these are two things which we can easily do, which is low-hanging fruit, right? If we give importance and improve our processes and products within the country, the global market will also take it. And the diaspora, Chinese diaspora user, we should use it. So I think that is the only thing we need to do. Give it importance domestically.
Considering when there's a huge market for sildenafil citrate, why can't there be a substitute in terms of an ashwagandha, right? It beats me, right? and
so many others, so many other herbs.
So many other herbs, right?
Yeah.
We're drawing to the close of the session, Meenakshi. I want to close on a very lighter note, considering we touched upon a lot of very complex subjects. I spoke about this movie Pushpa and then the red sandalwood. Why is there a demand for red sandalwood? Is it because of its? Is it furniture, beauty products, or why is what is the demand?
Yes. So red sandals, basically, see, red sandals, if you go to the growing area with the native habitat of red sandals, is parts of mainly Andhra and parts of Karnataka. So the dry, relatively rocky, that kind of area it grows in. And I had, in fact, a question, I was wondering about this question. I'd gone to the village and I asked that old lady there, one lady, what did you use it for? The only answer she gave me was they use it for pounding some. It was only used for red sandals, which was traditionally. And all of a sudden it became, because it's used for furniture in China and in Japan, I believe, for musical instruments. And suddenly they found this treasure of red sitting here, in, probably by one of us, based on information from one of us. It goes there and there is a complete decimation of species. So, spike in demand. So that is where market intelligence, we need this market intelligence, which we don't have. And red sandals, of course, you have focused on red sandals because the movie made out of it. We all know how it's going out of the country. There is another very important and very interesting herb, which is not, it's actually a mushroom, it's a fungus, which is cordyceps, which is known as Kira jadi or caterpillar fungus. Kira jadi, it is in the high Himalayas and the plateaus of Tibet and parts of China. It grows there. It used to grow all over these Himalayan mountains, and it was nobody bothered about that. Once it started, somebody from the trans border found that there is a good resource sitting here. It in a, I think, span of 5-6 years, it's decimated. It's over, and it's actually a fungus which infects a larva of an insect, and then rise to a fruiting body, and that fruiting body, Yarsa Gumba, you might have heard. And you know what is the price of Yarsa Gumba now, or that Kira jadi?
Please tell us.
3,500 rupees per gram.
Gram, wow.
I don't know what the rate of gold these days. Probably.
Yes, I was going to say, gold is about 4,000. This is almost the price of gold.
Yes, that is the price it's fetching now. Yes. And so there is a huge market, huge potential. And
yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing all your knowledge. I think we need to soon do a part 2 of the session, Meenakshi. There are so many questions that are unanswered. We'll have to hear about it. On the thought, I would like to thank everybody who stayed and attended this and gained from the conversation on NICE Samvaad with Mrs. Meenakshi Negi. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you all soon, the next Samvaad session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and having me here and giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.